Okay, so last week we did an assignment on cell organelles where you had to cut out the function cards, glue them down, and then we had to cut out some memory items, and then you also glued that down. And so today I want to focus in more on organelles because maybe you are still struggling with what do these tiny little organs inside a cell do. So I'm going to explain the cell analogy project. Here we go. Introduction. Cells need to carry on the same basic functions as we do to sustain life. The difference is cells do this with much smaller parts. These smaller structures that allow the cell to function are called organelles, tiny organs. Also, plant and animal cells have some similar parts and some parts that are not similar. It's only common sense that if you are able to relate things you learned in class to everyday things, you'll remember it better. It's not every day that you and your friends sit around at home discussing the endoplasmic reticulum. However, you probably do discuss things like cars or your homes and places to visit. Therefore, your task in this assignment is to relate the different cell organelles to an everyday situation or thing using an analogy. And, this analogy that you pick should be something that you are familiar with, that you understand. So your task is to come up with an analogy for the cell of your choice and its organelles. Your analogy will be represented in the form of a poster that represents a cell and its organelles. You should compare roles of at least 8 organelles to a part of the analogy. So there are 2 parts to your little assignment here. The first part's the analogy. You'll have a well-drawn or constructed picture of your analogy. So if you were going to do a cell city, like relate the cell to the city of Wheaton, you would have a picture of the city with each of the parts of your analogy. Part 2 is the description. In the packet, page 3, I think is where it starts, you need to describe how the analogy fits in with that organelle. Okay, so I give an example here. For example, going back to, let's say I'm going to do the city of Wheaton. I would start off with the description of the nucleus. The nucleus of the cell is the main control center of the cell. It holds all the information needed for the cell to function properly. So like in your packet, that's where this would go, right? It's the main control center of the cell. It holds all the information needed for the cell to function properly. This bottom half is the description of your analogy. So what would be the nucleus in the city of Wheaton? I might say City Hall. Not Cell Hall. Wow. City Hall would be the nucleus because it controls, the city of Wheaton, and this is where you can find laws and regulations. The mayor works here, etc. You'd go on and maybe describe what the mayor does. So this bottom half is for your analogy. So like going back to my example of the city of Wheaton, what would be the cell membrane? Well, the cell membrane is a barrier, okay? It's a flexible covering or barrier that surrounds the cell. Okay, so it's kind of like the boundary of where a cell begins. So what would be my boundary for where the city begins? Well, I'd say city limits. Okay, it is the boundary between the city and outside the city. I really don't know how you would describe outside the city of Wheaton. But this bottom half is where it fits inside your analogy. Okay, so there's part 2. Here's a list of organelles. The stars or asterisks are things that have to be on your poster because all eukaryotic cells have a nucleus and all of them have a cell membrane. And then you get to choose 6 more. Okay, so you have to have 8 organelles total. You can do the endoplasmic reticulum, the ribosomes, the Golgi apparatus, vesicles, mitochondria, vacuole, lysosomes, centrioles. If you do a plant cells have cell walls. They have a chloroplast that absorbs sunlight and makes sugar. This is how you will be graded. This is like a simple little rubric. 1 means you did not meet the expectations. 5 means that you did. So accuracy and clarity of the analogy, doesn't make sense. Are all the organelles included? Are there 8 organelles? Accuracy of the organelle description. Do you have that? I know it's a separate piece of paper. That's false. It's really in this packet. I need to change that. Are the functions of each organelle correct? Completion and organization. Is your analogy creative? Does your project include all the necessary parts? Is it organized? Does it show a high amount of effort? And then if you do work with a partner, you will each grade each other. Did you both contribute equally and participate to finish this project? Now, hold on, just give me 5 seconds here. Okay, if this still isn't making sense, I'm gonna, I wish I could show you some examples, like turn on a camera, but I've had students do The Office. They compared the cell to The Office. So they drew a picture of Dunder Mifflin, the paper company, and they said, okay, Michael Scott is the nucleus, because the nucleus of a cell manages everything that goes on in it. Therefore, Michael is the nucleus because Michael manages everything that goes on in the office. The cell membrane protects the cell and controls what goes in and out. Dunder Mifflin building is the cell membrane because it protects everything inside the cell. They said the Golgi apparatus, which packages things and prepares them to leave the cell, is like Daryl. So Daryl is the Golgi apparatus because he packages and prepares paper to leave the building. The mitochondria breaks down energy to be used by the cell. The break room is the mitochondria because it has vending machines with food in them to be used as energy for the employees. Give me like 5 minutes, okay? And so, you know, that's just one example of comparing a cell to the Dunder Mifflin paper company. Maybe this person knows a lot about the office and they don't know anything about the cell, but after this project, maybe you will understand the cell more. I've had people compare a cell to a car, to certain factories, to restaurants like McDonald's, to the Traverse County Fair, to the human body. And so you try to find something that you know, like even like football teams. You know, what would be, if you were to do the WHN football team, you know, who would be the nucleus? What would be the lysosomes, you know? That's like the garbage men, you know, like would it be just like trash receptacles located around the football field? So that's what the Cell Analogy Project is really about, okay? So your description is these pages here. Now you only need to describe the organelles that you're going to use in your project. So if you're not using the Golgi apparatus, well then just leave it blank, okay? I'm not asking you to define that. You just define the ones that you are going to use and then explain how it fits inside your analogy. So that's what we are doing for the rest of the week. Now in my notes and in your notes, I have the Star Wars cell analogy. Okay, this is not a perfect example, okay? You could think of other things to describe a cell too, but I kind of like Star Wars, right? So I decided to do one around the Death Star. Okay, so the Death Star walls, that would be my cell membrane. It's the barrier between space and the Death Star. Emperor Palpatine is the nucleus. He's kind of like the head honcho, controls everything. The endoplasmic reticulum is kind of involved with transportation, moving vesicles, so I said hyperspace routes. The hangar bay are the vacuoles. Vacuoles store food, water, and waste. In the hangar bay, hey, it stores materials for the Death Star. The ribosomes make proteins, okay? And I decided to do that with the midichlorians, which are like these microscopic organisms inside the bloodstream that, you know, give people the power of the Force in a way. So it makes them powerful. It makes them into a Jedi. You can't really be a Jedi without midichlorians, and so that's kind of how I fit in the ribosome. So that's probably not the greatest analogy. I said my stormtroopers were like Golgi apparatuses. Golgi apparatus prepare things and it ships them, and then, you know, stormtroopers, I do not. The lysosome was my trash compactor. So lysosomes, you know, is where waste products get stored, and there's the trash compactor. Blast doors, I said, were my cell wall, helps protect from one section of the Death Star to another. The mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of a cell, was my reactive center, because that's, you know, what powers the star base. So, I mean, not the best analogy. I guess I could like fix some things, make some things better, but you're trying to relate the cell to something that you are familiar with.